than Marin County anywhere.
Really?
And
That's crazy to me.
they said they needed a new high school.
Yeah.
They passed the hat. And at the end of the night, they had enough money. They passed the hat. No bonds. Passed the hat. Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, that just wouldn't happen today, though. I mean, it's just.
No.
Did you see those the test results across the state? STEM test results. I think the average is at 44%. Are ready, like, I forget which grades, but they're ready for. They're like STEM ready. I mean, yeah, I mean, the average is 44%, which is great, but like the lowest was Black Lake, and that was like 8%.
How was Cascade? They had the greatest tech program.
I think they were really high. Yeah, actually. Yeah. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It's now 11 o'clock. We've got a pre-commission work session, and I want to welcome our lovely friends from the Meridian Fire Department. Welcome, Mr. Joe Bongiorno.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners and directors, we're here today to talk about cloud-based Opticom services. So I've been in the fire service for 23 years now, and over the time, as data is getting better and better, we're finding that Meridian has a response time problem. And that's our total response time. That's from the second the dispatcher picks up the phone until, hi, my name is Joe, I'm from the Meridian Fire Department, how can I help you? So it's that total response time. So basically we're trying to strive to meet standards. And the standards for fire response is NFPA 1710. And so what we're working on...
Which can you explain what that is?
What's that? I'm sorry, NFPA 1710?
Yes.
So that's our standard. So NFPA is the National Fire Protection Association. They write standards for the fire service. So like 921 is for fire investigations. So, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Joe Bongiorno. I'm the Deputy Chief of Prevention with the fire department. I'm also the fire marshal. So 921 is the standard for fire investigations. 1033 is the standard for fire investigators. So it's what they need to do to meet the standard to be a fire investigator. So 1710 is the standard for response for fire service for fire and EMS responses. And so in that standard, it talks about response times. And it talks about the pieces of that response. So there's the dispatch time, which is the first piece. That's the amount of time it takes from the dispatcher picking up the phone saying, hi, how can we help you? Finding out what the problem is, hitting the dispatch button and sending the apparatus off to wherever they need to go. So there's pieces we can work on with that. We've had instances where we've had like a 3-minute delay at dispatch. So there's things that we can put into play that Deputy Chief Butterfield and Chief Bloom are working on with dispatch to where it's, what do they call it? Basically, it's station alerting. And basically, if they call and say, my house is on fire, they'll immediately hit the button to send the first apparatus that's closest. Then they'll get the further information, and then they'll dispatch the rest of the full response. So we're working with Ada County Dispatch on how we can shorten some time periods there to gain more time on our responses. The second piece is the turnout time. So the second dispatch hits that button and says, Engine 33, you're going to this call, they have to put on their turnouts or get on the apparatus and get rolling. And so that's a piece that we have responsibility with. So our battalion chiefs are working with the captains, making sure that the crews are ready to go whenever they're out in the city or whenever they're at the station, so that they know they need to get dressed and get in the apparatus and get the wheels rolling as quickly as possible. The third piece is what we're here today to talk about, and that's travel time. That's the actual when the wheels start rolling until we get to the place and we set the air brake and we're now on scene. So with that, currently we have the Opticom system, and we've been looking at other solutions on how we can shorten our response times throughout the city. And as you know, I mean, this county is blown up like crazy. And so we're looking at all three of the puzzle pieces on how we can shorten those response times. And looking at the cloud-based Opticom system is one of the ways that we're looking at how we can shorten times. I have Corey with me, and he'll be speaking here in just a minute. He's the more of the nuts and the bolts of things, and he'll be able to explain things a little better. But basically, we have some situations out there where we have line of sight problems. Like the perfect example, because I was the captain out there, is Meridian Road and Overland. When you're coming west on Meridian Road and you drop down that hill to where Overland is, where it used to be JB's, it's now KJ's Kitchen is and stuff, you can't catch that light with the Opticom. Stop, wait for the intersection to clear and go. With the cloud-based system, it will help as the crews are coming down Overland, it's going to be clearing the intersection before they even get there. And again, Corey will get through that a little more. So right now, for us, the NFPA standard is 5 minutes, depending on in an urban setting for response times. And honestly, we're sitting like at 8 or 9 minutes on some of our response times. So we're trying to get that shrunk down to get us more in line with the standards. And so the city, again, we're looking for ways that we can help with that. We have Caleb and Brian here helping with our traffic stuff that we work with you guys on, with our priorities on intersections. We have the mayor that pledged, I don't know how much money it was for the intersection the Linda Road overpass design. That's going to help because that's going to give us another route over the freeway because that's a limiting factor. So that'll help with our response times as well. And then just, the street designs and stuff that I work with the traffic group on everything. So again, this is just a small a piece. So I know Councilwoman Schrader and the mayor talked to Director Wong to get this thing going. They're like, yeah, let's do this. We've got MileVision on board, which used to be GTT, to work on this cloud-based situation. And so what we're looking for today is we need a connection to the system to able to get this Opticom-based system to function. And that's what Corey's going to talk about. Obviously, we're the first ones that are looking at this. I have spoken with Jeremy Shabat with Ada County Paramedics. They're interested. I've talked to Chief Tominski and Star Middleton. They're 100% on board. He's like, yeah, let's do this. This sounds great. I've got a phone call into Chief Niemeyer. Obviously, they're one of the bigger users. And then I do know for a fact that Nampa and Caldwell both are utilizing the Opticom, the cloud-based system as well. So I guess we're really not the first. We'll be the first in Ada County to look at this solution. But that's where we're at. So I think I've rambled enough. So with that, if we can get Corey on board, and I'll take a seat and let him present, and then we can see if we can answer some questions for you.
Yeah, I see Corey online. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
There he is. And
Great.
he's got a presentation too for you.
All right, the floor is yours, Corey.
Thank you. Let me start sharing my screen real quick. Oops, 1 second. There we go. Let me know when you can see my screen. It should just say, just be a title slide.
Looks good.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for the time to present to you today. I do have about a dozen slides to go through, so I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible, being respectful of your time. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. MyoVision is very excited to be here today, presenting the solution that we're looking to implement in the city of Meridian and hopefully further. Without further ado, I'll just kind of go through each slide and we'll address them as we go. So as far as the agenda, I'm going to do some quick introductions of myself and a member of my team that will be heavily involved in this process. We're going to do an overview of the solution itself, what you guys have today, what the differences are of what we're wanting to implement, what the effects are, and so on and so forth. We'll talk a little bit about the technical aspects surrounding security, what we need from ACHD, the responsibilities of each party in this particular project, and then we'll finish with a quick Q&A session, if that's okay with everybody. So as far as the team from MyoVision, my name is Corey Ovich. I'm a senior technical project manager with MyoVision. As Joe mentioned, we were formerly known as GTT, which was the makers of Opticom. We were recently purchased by a company called MyoVision. As far as the project's concerned, I'll be the primary point of contact for all things related to the project, as well as coordinating any remote work or field work that we do mutually with ACHD or the city of Meridian. Alan Scherer will also be a very important part of this project from our team. He's going to be the one doing all of the IT or technical based work. He's also going to be the one setting up the new Opticom cloud platform environment, as well as directly communicating with those responsible for helping us test each vehicle and intersection as the system's deployed. So real quick, just to kind of level set with everybody, I thought it'd be important just to kind of describe what preemption is. So preemption is a system that allows authorized vehicles to request an immediate green light from the traffic controller at the intersections. And in addition to that, provide a red light to all of those directions that are opposing the direction of travel of that vehicle. Now, the idea behind preemption is not that it turns green when the vehicles get there. We want the intersections clear and stopped by the time everyone gets there, right? We don't want the fire engine to have to wait or weave through traffic because traffic's backed up. We want the intersection green in the direction of travel and everyone else stopped at the intersection to, improve multiple things, including, safety, travel time, that sort of thing. So this particular contract is under what we refer to as a PCAS model, or the Priority Control as a Service model. So what that means is it's a delivery model that we adopt, that we provide, that can help agencies acquire this solution without having all of the upfront capital costs in order to implement it. So basically, we're delivering this solution and responsible for monitoring and maintaining the solution for a period of 10 years. And the cost of this solution is spread out over that period of 10 years. So again, it gets a lot of the issue of upfront capital funding out of the way and allows agencies to pay this over a period of time. In this particular solution, in this case, it does not include the vehicle hardware, which the fire department already has, and it doesn't include the VPN connection, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, outside of the Opticom cloud platform. So that's where ACHD IT is actually involved, okay? So as far as the project itself, our goals are to enhance the existing Opticom deployment in your area. And we're going to provide you a more modern, effective, and efficient solution across the board. This eliminates a lot of line of sight issues that your current IR Opticom deployment provides. It's scalable, it's future-proof. By utilizing this cloud-based solutions, it really opens the doors to a lot of other things that are available to not only public safety entities in the area, but to the traffic department itself. We're going to lessen the possibility of system abuse. So in this particular case, on the deployment for the Meridian Fire Department, the only way that a authorized vehicle can request preemption from an intersection is if their light bar's on. There'll be no other way for anyone to request preemption from those vehicles. Obviously, increased safety is the number one priority for any of these systems. For public safety personnel driving vehicles or riding in vehicles, but also public motorists. By having all of those opposing directions red, it should really help, keep traffic standing still for that period so that the emergency vehicle can, successfully and safely transition through that intersection. Because they're not waiting in traffic, because we have a more responsive request for that preemption from the intersection, we're expecting increased response times as well from what they already have, because they're going to be able to traverse those intersections without having to stop to wait for traffic to clear. So currently, what's deployed is an Opticom infrared system today. I should have emphasized that. So today you have an infrared system. That infrared system was originally introduced back in 1992. And from what I understand, the city of Meridian and the county have been utilizing this infrared system for over 20 years as it sits today. There are some drawbacks to that current system, including line of sight, like we spoke about. So obstructions, hills, corners, sun glare, all of those types of things can cause the vehicle to not communicate to the intersection within time when they're supposed to, or at all if it's very bad scenarios. There's on-site regular maintenance and cleaning required. So it's an optical system. So there's a device that's sitting up on top of the fire truck or the fire apparatus. And then there's a device up on the mast arm at the traffic intersection. Both of those devices communicate to each other through infrared signals. And that's how this particular system is currently deployed. And I should also mention that ACHD does expect to continue to maintain this existing system as a backup because this will be network based in the cloud. It'll also provide a seamless integration path for any other agencies that want to adopt this solution. So we're not going to take anything down by implementing this. We're just going to enhance the existing system. And then eventually, over time, it may, come to the point where the infrared system is no longer needed because we have so many agencies migrated to the cloud, or it's just not usable anymore. Okay. So as far as this new project is concerned, it is all location based. So there's no visual communication between the fire truck or and the traffic pole. There's no on-site maintenance because all of the information gathering is done in the cloud. We're going to be reusing existing infrastructure that's in the vehicle. So they have Cradlepoint IBR 900 modems that we're going to be using, as well as an extensibility dock that's being added to those modems to provide us information about the vehicles. It also comes with a capability that doesn't exist in the infrared system that we call forwarding. So the way the system is designed is that there are these geofences that we draw on the roads. We refer to those as approach zones. So we are able, based on where the vehicle is located, to request preemption at the approaching intersection. Now, since we are tied into the turn signals of vehicles with this solution, we're able to tell the next intersection without them approaching the intersection that they're coming, without them actually being in the approach zone or coming towards that intersection yet. So again, that gives them another level of being able to clear out intersections in their path of travel, which is something they don't have today. This solution, as I said, it works side by side with the existing Opticom deployment. So there's nothing bad that could happen between the two. They're both our solutions at the end of the day. And it'll be whichever one gets to that intersection first to request will be the one that's granted, whether it's the existing system or the cloud system. This also does provide you a vast amount of future expansion capability, whether that's mutual aid with other public safety entities throughout the area, public works. We have a lot of agencies that have begun to adopt adding this type of solution to plow trucks so that they can, get their plow trucks through main corridors when there's a blizzard, when they need to clear it and they don't have to dodge cars as they're going through and plowing, as well as public transit. We offer public transit capabilities that can, decrease dwell times, increase fuel efficiency, all sorts of things. So by adopting this cloud technology, you're setting yourself up to adapt to additional technologies within the cloud environment and enhance your current system even more. So as far as this particular deployment, again, it is a cloud-based EVP system. It includes 96 intersections. We'll be communicating directly to the traffic controllers inside the traffic cabinets. There'll be 24 Meridian emergency vehicles equipped with this technology. As I mentioned, it is a 10-year PCAS project, so we're responsible for maintaining, monitoring, and reporting on the use of this system for a period of 10 years. And again, we do expect future adoption by other agencies within this area. So as far as responsibilities go for the project, it'll be MyoVision's responsibility to create our Opticom Cloud Platform instance, to collaborate with ACHDIT to create that connection to the traffic controller, to test connectivity to the traffic controllers. We're going to help the fire department with the modem configuration changes they have to make. We're going to provide remote drivers training for all the operators at Meridian Fire, as well as, again, provide that 10 years of management of the cloud-based system. From the Meridian side, obviously they provided us already the intersection and vehicle information, the Cradle Point modem expansion docs, which I mentioned earlier, and a management subscription from Cradle Point that they'll be acquiring. They'll provide us an on-site presence for testing each vehicle. And also there's going to be an agreement drafted, I believe, between the city attorney and ACHD on how this is all going to work, but I'll let Joe speak to that if there are more questions. As far as ACHD is concerned, we are looking for ACHD to collaborate with us to create and test that VPN, to complete any traffic controller programming as needed, which we don't expect there to be much, especially because you're already using our preemption system at the intersections, and provide on-site presence when we're performing intersection testing, because every intersection we deploy, every vehicle we deploy is going to be fully tested and activated before we move on to the next one. And that just makes things a lot easier and a lot more predictable as far as the deployment goes. And then obviously authorized activation of the system once the intersections pass all of the tests that we provide and that satisfies the county. As far as security goes, you know, I have some high level points here I'll just cover quickly. All of the data that's at rest and in transit is encrypted. We use certificate authentication between the modems and our cloud platform. So only modems within that have that certificate, that have that authorized certificate installed by us, are capable of communicating to the cloud platform. Only MyoVision personnel have access to make any modifications or anything to any of the authorized locations or vehicles. We follow all AWS security best practices. Only authorized vehicles, again, can request preemption from the system. And then any intersection or vehicle preemption capabilities are able to be disabled at a click of a button through our cloud platform. So if there is any issues or anything, we can immediately disable those to make sure that we don't interrupt anything major. Okay, that was my my quick presentation of this solution, and I'll open it up for questions.
Did you want to ask them now? Okay, hold on, Corey. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yeah, I've got two questions. Initially, number one has to do with security of your system, and have you been successfully hacked, and what was the result?
We have not been hacked, you know, ever, as far as I know. I know that we've had numerous conversations with the IT staff already. We've responded to the questionnaire they provided. They provided us another round of questions that we've submitted back to them at about 95% completion. There's still a couple other questions that remain, but they are aware, and we have committed to replying with those answers by the end of the week.
My second question was, how much does it cost and who pays for it?
Sure. I don't have those numbers directly in front of me, but I may let Joe touch on that.
Yeah, Mr. President and Commissioner, I believe $835,000 is what we're looking at, and the city of Meridian is paying it. We make it, it's over a 10-year period is what we're paying.
I know there's some more questions.
Yeah. Mr. Bonjour, did you have anything else to add to Corey's presentation before I just?
No, I think you hit it out right on the bat. And again, we're here just to ask permission to tap into the system with that VPN. And you know, Corey is continuing to work with your IT people, with the traffic people, to make sure that they're satisfied that they're good with it. So I mean, we want everybody to be comfortable. And again, this is just another, how can we partner together to make things better? And we're trying to find a solution to our response time problem. And this is a piece of that puzzle, and how we can work together to try and if it works, hey, great. Maybe we can, again, I got Chief Tominski's on board, and Ada County paramedics are looking at it. I believe Greg was going to be invited to present to the JPA. So that's all the fire departments with the Ada County paramedics. So he'll be involved. He's been involved since the beginning. So again, we're hoping this develops and then expands.
Gotcha.
100%.
Thanks for circling back to like the main ask. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Commissioners, questions?
Yes, Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney.
just a couple of quick questions on this. First of all, the presentation indicated that there are 96 intersections. Is that all of the signalized intersections in Meridian?
Yes, sir. Sorry, Madam President, Commissioner, that is all of them.
Okay. Does this system require the installation of any additional hardware at any of the intersections, or is it simply tapping into the existing system that our traffic management system already uses? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, Mr. Commissioner, as Corey indicated, everything's already out there.
Okay.
All we are doing is we just need that, excuse me, that VPN connection, and then the system will talk to the cabinets. All the hardware is already there that we're aware of because we've paid for all the hardware that's in those cabinets. The fire department has, so it's all we got the right stuff.
Okay.
So there should
if
not be. If anything, there may be some slight programming changes if something's missing. But as far as we're aware, because we've been purchasing the right equipment the 20 years I've been here, and Kenny Bowers, as you all know, Kenny, he's the guy that's been buying all this stuff from GTT. We should have all the right stuff out there.
Okay. So now is the current traffic control system, is it a closed system or is it also connected to the internet?
I think that's going to be a question for. I'm
Okay,
not sure how your system is.
Well, I guess that's because that of course is a concern if we're connecting outward, or do we have a closed system already? And I don't know the answer to that question. In any case, but connecting a new system, a GPS connected system, would be that kind of a connection, right? So we're now
that's the VPN connection.
Potentially vulnerable, and that's of course why Commissioner Goldthorpe asked the question about hacking and so on, because of course that would be one of our major concerns, is if some third party could somehow gain control of the traffic signals. You also mentioned that the system was only operable by vehicles with their emergency lights on and so on. Is that currently the way it's also set up? Because I've seen Ada County paramedics go through a lot of intersections and reset the signals when they didn't have their lights going or sirens or anything.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner, with the Meridian Fire Department, our lights have to be on.
Okay.
That's the way they're set up.
But the presumption, though, is it sounds like your plan is though this system would be usable by all emergency vehicles, police, paramedics, fire, and so on.
100%. We initially had Meridian PD in the contract as well, but the mayor was not comfortable with the dollar amount that it was going to cost to add police in. So we took them out just to get fires started, and then eventually the plan will be to add them back in.
Okay, so
I believe it pushed it over like, I don't remember what the exact number, but it was like $1.1 million with police involved, because it added another, I want to say 43 vehicles.
Okay.
So it was considerably more that the mayor was comfortable with spending.
So is the proposal at this point solely for the fire department, or is any other Ada County paramedics aren't included?
No, we're like I said, sorry, Madam President, Commissioner, Starfire is interested, 100%. They're on board. They're interested in looking at it. I have a phone call into Chief Niemeyer, and Ada County paramedics are also interested as well. And so again, I have a phone call into Jeremy. Jeremy's going to be the one that suggested to Mr. Fullerton about having a meeting so we can, again, the more we can get on board, the more robust the system will be. And it helps everybody if we can get everybody on board. So right now we're looking at just the impact to the District of Meridian. And so if we can get everybody on board in the county, then obviously it's a better solution.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure there are other questions. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Gold?
Thanks, Madam President. Yeah, so I'm wondering if you can just reiterate again what you need from us and what the ongoing operational needs from ACHD will be for this change.
Corey, do you want to handle that one?
Sure. So from our perspective, there are just a couple things we need from the ACHD. We would need authorization to create and maintain that VPN between our cloud platform and a connection directly to the traffic controller. And to kind of expand a little bit on that, there will be no additional hardware added at the intersection. All the existing hardware that's there will stay, and this solution will be directly to traffic controller, no other hardware added to the intersection. So in addition to that VPN, the only other thing we'll need from ACHD is their on-site presence when we go to perform testing to ensure that it meets all of their expectations, and that they can approve us enabling it at the intersection level. So what that consists of is what we refer to as a virtual drive test. So we will have a representative from ACHD standing at the intersection or in their car, doesn't necessarily have to be out. We are going to simulate a vehicle from the cloud driving through that intersection. We're going to make sure that each direction is called appropriately, that there's no outstanding issues, there's no variables there. And once the ACHD representative is satisfied with the test that they are approved of it working properly, then at that point we will consider that intersection live. So it's the VPN and to assist us with the testing on site.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yeah, again, it's kind of like my hacking question, but when you're into our network with the VPN or anything else that's required, how do you guarantee our network's security?
Sure. So there's a lot of things that we put in place to ensure security. Obviously, that's a hot button for a lot of people. Following all the AWS security guidelines is key. The certificates on both sides of communication pathways, encryption both ways, as well as the VPN encryption pathways. So we do everything we can to make sure that there's no possibility of people interrupting those communication protocols between all the different aspects of we maintain regular updates, again, based on AWS security guidelines to all of our cloud-based solutions, including patches, updates, best practices, as well as any releases that AWS puts out of any vulnerabilities, we patch right away.
A follow-up question to that, and that is, if you provide or know of, are there any other options to doing this that don't require access to our network and controller?
There are likely some alternatives. We have alternative deployments elsewhere, but that would require hardware at the intersection, whether it be a modem or some other piece of equipment to get us communications. In this particular architecture, we need communications to communicate with the traffic controller.
Commissioner Hanson, do you mind if I ask
Oh,
a
go
question
ahead.
really quick?
You'll
So,
probably ask the best.
Corey, are you the same provider that is servicing this system in Nampa and Caldwell?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I could research that and get back to you.
Yeah, they're testing, sorry, Mr.
It's
Madam President, they have, I believe it's 2 intersections apiece that they're trying, 2 of their major intersections.
And
So
when
they're
did-
in testing phase right now as well.
How long have they been, when did they start this testing phase? Do you know? Is it like in the last month or the last 6 months?
It's a little older than that.
Okay,
I would have to check with Wade with Myovision to find out exactly where they're at.
okay.
But that was actually where we got the, hey, have you looked into Opticom? Because we're doing it at these 2 intersections.
Do you know
So-
why they picked just 2 intersections?
I think it was their busiest ones, like I said, and they were just looking at a solution to get through those intersections. Because we have, Eagle in the interstate, Eagle in St. Luke's Lane. I used to work out of Station 4 up there on Eagle Road, and getting through there at 4 o'clock is a disaster. And so that's where we were looking at the second the tones go off, it's going to start clearing those intersections, knowing that they're going, let's say, to the village. So it'll start clearing those intersections before we even get there. So, yeah. And one other thing that Corey or I didn't mention is if the system were to fail, if something happens and Corey's computers go down, nothing changes. The system is, we're not modifying the system. So infrared still works, nothing changes.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess my question is sort of for our own team as well as yours. It's sort of legal questions. I don't know whether there's any other use of the line of sight override system in Ada County or non line of sight. So is this the first? This would be the first time that this would be a system which would allow the override of the signals, but not using a line of sight technology, right? Would this be the, yeah, I'm getting nods over there. So this would be new. This would be a new technology. And then my next question, also sort of, this would then set up a legal relationship, not just with like we have now with fellow, public entities, governments, but also with a service provider that we don't have a legal relationship with now. And so we would need to have some sort of legal relationship with them. I noticed in your notes that would be set up, or is being set up, negotiated with Meridian, but it would need to be set up with the highway district as well.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner, 100% correct. Yeah, we would need an agreement between the city of Meridian and Ada County Highway District for this
But
program.
also with the service provider, so that it's like there's a new entity in here, this private service provider,
Right.
that we wouldn't have a relationship with if it was just between Eagle and MyoVision. It seems to me we'd have to close that triangle legally
Yeah.
to protect the process and actually put in requirements of security and so forth that have been raised.
I'm sure you're 100%. I'm asking about the fire
Yeah,
code.
so I'm looking
We'll
over
leave the
there, I'm looking at
legalese.
my attorney,
We'll
our
let the
attorney.
attorneys
who's-
hash
yeah,
that out,
so
but you are probably 100% correct, sir.
I'd need clarity on that
Yeah.
because it's opening up a whole bunch of issues.
100%
We are very,
understood.
very concerned about protecting
Yes.
that system. The third is, and you bringing up Eagle, and lots of people point to Eagle and come to us and say, Eagle Road. And we say, well, that is a state highway.
It is.
And so a lot of the signals and sometimes the problematic intersections are on state highways. So would ITD need to be part of that process because ITD determines the system? So I'm getting nods from there. So this is a little more complicated than just saying, just switch on and let us use.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
there is
so-
paperwork that would need to be happening in the background. Sorry, Madam
Okay,
President, I
so
keep forgetting. my
Those
protocol.
would be my big concerns because, we haven't vetted this private service provider. We deal with service providers in lots and lots of arenas. And that would be something we'd need to do before we could get any deeper than that.
100% agree. Madam President and Commission, I think we're all in agreement. I think all we're looking for is we need yes, we can make this happen. And then once we can, everybody's satisfied that it's going to be secure, it's going to be good, then we can start in on the legal part of it. We'll get, ITD, ACHD, City of Meridian, MyoVision, everybody on board, get the documents signed, whatever we need to do, and then we can get out there and actually start making things happen. But we have to have that approval first before we can really move forward with what we've got.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
I'm under the understanding that this being a work session, we can't give you the approval.
I believe that's what I heard also,
Yeah, okay.
Commissioner.
We wouldn't until we hear from our legal
Yeah.
department
Well,
anyway.
it seems that what we can do is,
Commissioner McKinney,
it seems that what we can do here is to say,
proceed.
send a formal proposal to staff and have staff review it and legal review it and all of that, and then it comes back for us to make a formal decision.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
And I want to add on to that. I think I'm thankful that you're here and you brought MyoVision along to give this formal presentation. Really appreciate the questions from my fellow commissioners. I'm deeply in support of proceeding and going through the motions to get to a solution and being a partner in this.
Great.
This is a really critical piece to making sure that you guys have those really efficient response times. And I just applaud you for coming to us with this, hey, can you be a support and partner in this
Right.
to help us? So I really appreciate you guys doing that. And yeah, I think a formal, like the next step, working with our staff, legal, our IT, but I think for the next work session or action item is having a joint presentation with our staff explaining the technical pieces of how we would do that. Because what's nice is they can explain it as though we're fifth graders, and that'll help with people that are online to understand. If the shoe fits, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You know, so it'll help with
Keep it
everybody
fireproof.
understanding exactly what this means and, in a really elementary way.
No, Madam President, I agree, and I appreciate, again, you guys allowing me here today to do this. So I'll work with Corey, and we'll first, we're gonna make sure your IT people are satisfied, because obviously if they're not satisfied, then we've got a problem. So we want to get them satisfied that what we're doing is gonna be secure. And once they're satisfied that the system that we're proposing will be secured, then we can go ahead and we'll come forward and we'll work with Greg and his team and say, okay, we would like to do this officially now. Let's do the proposal. We'll get legal involved with everybody to make sure that the documents are all in line of how we're going to do this. And then we can get the pens on the paper and move forward.
Thank you, sir. Any other last questions?
Just a comment, I'm actually glad you're here. I'm remembering back to, shortly after the Opticom system was, installed, and the very location at Meridian and Overland that you first talked about. I was driving east on Overland and, had the green, and, all of a sudden in front of us, a police officer with no siren whips through,
Oh.
going south on Overland. 4 crashes resulted, including me.
Yeah,
And so, you know, anything that can make this work well is just fine.
yeah.
And I just want to add too, I like this ability to maybe, if we frame it as such that this is a pilot with just your guys' team
100%,
and
yeah.
your department, especially if there is this interest with other departments across the county.
Yep.
So we can, you know, especially with when we have our staff on site working through those things, right? We can apply that lens if we want to do like a countywide system. So I like that. I appreciate your being collaborative with other fire departments as well, and we can
Yeah.
learn from this experience, assuming we get through all the hoops.
Yeah, Madam President, I actually have a 12:30 appointment
Sorry,
with
yeah.
Chief Newmeyer
There you
to
go.
talk about this. So, again, we're trying to get everybody on board. I know, I believe, Mr. Fullerton had brought this up a while back. I don't know what happened with it. It was just what I found out. So again, we want to be, we're trying whatever we can to get those response times shrunk. Because again, time, Chief Bloom's favorite thing is time is tissue.
Yeah.
And if we're not there quickly enough, that tissue is dying, and we need to get there as fast as we can. And obviously with fire, we want to get there and be able to put it out and save lives,
Yeah,
so.
for sure.
You have a 4-minute standard to go for response time, don't you, for fire? Or is that just Boise City?
It's 5. 5 is what that NFPA 1710 calls for. Again, it depends if you're in urban or if you're in the rural, the times are different. But we're well outside of where we would like to be with our times, so.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move along into our pre-commission agenda. I just had a couple, just one quick question for the commission to consider before I ask our routine questions and turn over to the director. But, you know, I know we all have had a very busy year, and I think people were looking forward to having just 4 remaining meetings until the end of the year. But I was wondering if folks would be open to having a 3rd meeting in November to talk more about the kind of like building off of the master street map update that we have today on kind of the investments that we're having in the entire network. Because I feel like there is some misunderstanding about the investments in community projects versus our road widening projects and expansion projects like that. And I think naturally, right, like a lot of these things are on the consent agenda. It's on autopilot. Our staff are doing a tremendous job just, you know, churning out these really important projects, but they don't make it to the commission. So it can get kind of lost in just that automation. We obviously don't have to make a decision today, but I think I wanted to plant the seed in light of our, you know, report by Justin later today, that if you guys want to have an additional meeting to talk more about where are the, like, which projects are our most expensive, where that funding is going. I think that would be a worthwhile conversation if you guys would like to. So,
I won't be here at other weeks in November.
oh, you won't?
No.
Okay.
I'll be up in your old neighborhood
That's
where
right.
there's no service.
Lucky you.
That would be fine with me.
You'd be fine with that? Okay.
I would
Commissioner
be-
Hanson?
I think that's a great idea. Because it sort of dovetails into what I was gonna ask. I've had a number of neighbors saying, what's going on Lake Hazel? Because they're starting
Yeah.
getting poised. I know there's a lot going on in Lake Hazel. And I can't remember having a presentation on what we're doing. And it's a major investment. It's
Yeah.
a major disruption of people's, and we're making people detour on desert and other streets. So I think that'd be really good. I think our staff already knows what's going on in Lake Hazel and what's going to go on through the rest of next year. So that would be really good, to do a deep dive. That was one of my issues. I thought, well, I haven't had that presentation, so I can't speak to it. All I can do is say, I don't know. Exactly.
And I know that we've had staff working diligently on the Linder Road, or sorry, not Linder Road, the Highway 16, projects and elements with that. So, we could lump a couple updates in with this piece, right? So anyway, it looks like there's some opportunity, but we can refine it later on in the rest of the meeting. So, okay. Any housekeeping items or questions on the agenda for today?
Well, I would like to suggest one thing because it's just struck me. We had a gentleman who was a perennial candidate for these positions. He ran for the governorship of the great state of Idaho, for the presidency of the United States, and he was the funniest man God ever created, and he died yesterday. So I would like to raise my milk glass, which I already have, to Harley Brown.
One question,
Okay.
Madam President, I just wondered if I could get a copy of the scope. We pulled the Amity project off of the agenda last week, and I know it's onto the agenda for next week. So as soon as the scope of work wasn't attached, and that's part of it's like what was in the scope of work. It's just as soon as you can, so we can start chewing on that. That would be great.
Getting a head nod, so sounds like that'll be accomplished. Perfect. All right, Director, over to you.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners. A couple of things to share with you. First off, I've asked your attention here, these two magnificent trophies that the Ada County Highway District recently were awarded. We attended last week's Idaho Business Review's Project of the Year event, and the Ada County Highway District was one of one that were awarded two awards in the transportation category, in all categories. For first place for the 10-mile project, and third place was for Roosevelt. So a tremendous job on your team's efforts here. I have the main project officer, I believe, behind me, which was Amber and such. And she carried our water up on the stage to be awarded these wonderful things. So commissioners, they've done an amazing job. And again, from the Idaho Business Review, we have a great record going so far on awards from that great operation. But I want to share this with you going on. In front of you, commissioners, you have two impact fee reports. The first one is the annual, and I'd like to draw your attention to the final on this. City of Meridian led all of the cities in Ada County in impact fee investments, both in commercial and in residential. The city of Star led, or was number 2 when it came down to residential impact fee investments, and the city of Boise was second when it came down to commercial across the board. And then the second one is October's review. And again, what's interesting, the city of Garden City is leading the pack right now on residential impact fee investment, which bodes to their continued development as they're moving forward. Just doing a great job. And the city of Meridian is currently leading the pack when it comes down to commercial investment, with the city of Eagle, number 2 in commercial investment. But just for your review, these are the stats that we have at this point in time. I'd like to let you know that last night's Harrison Boulevard's Trick or Treat event was tremendously successful. And there were lots of trick-or-treaters out and about. And as you probably know, our team does partner with Boise PD to ensure a safe operations. We actually closed cross traffic on Harrison to make sure the kids and all the families were safe across the board. Thursday, I'd like to remind the commission that we are hosting the commercial developers for their quarterly meeting. I know Commissioner Hanson, you've already indicated you'll be there. It begins at 10 o'clock. It'll be at the Orchard facility upstairs and such. And I believe we sent you out the agenda just a little bit ago. I'd like to remind the commission that on this Saturday is the Boise Veterans Parade. All of the details have been finalized except one, which is we're working on, but we see no issues going forward to interrupt that great thing. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend an economic forecast presentation at JUMP, and it was presented by the Hopkins Financial Group. And I wanted to share some of the insights that they gave the folks that were in attendance. It was kind of interesting. They stated that Boise and Idaho has the highest percentage rate of the cost of increase of cost of housing in the nation. Now, again, that's a percentage; it's not the dollars, but that quieted a lot of people down in that. Idaho has the second highest percentage rate for population growth in the nation. Rhode Island is dead last. Nationally, currently they have 1.2 job openings for every eligible worker. In Idaho, it's 2 job openings for every eligible worker. So there are challenges ahead. The speakers pointed to the continued accelerated growth in the cost of goods and services that the country is seeing right now. And but the largest employer in growth for job opportunities was the government, which is interesting. They pointed to the fact that the housing market continues to be stagnant and declining due to interest rates. Those with the 2% and 3% current interest mortgage rates are not selling, and those that want to buy homes are not wanting to sign up for the 8% and above when it comes down to interest rates. So it's a challenge that the nation is going through at this point in time. Consumer savings is down from the pandemic levels. However, consumers are still buying, but with credit cards as opposed to cash and such, or checks. The federal outlook was not great. The quote there was lots of uncertainties and we are in a wait and see mode, which according to the experts there was not a confidence signal to businesses going forward into the next couple quarters. As we've shared with you before, commercial real estate continues to hurt regarding investments due to interest rates, hybrid scheduling expectations, and virtual business operations in the future. And finally, based on the economy, there were 2 facts here I'd like to share with you. The professor stated that he was recently in Montana and it cost $18 for a Big Mac meal, which was a hamburger, fries, and a Coke. And then recently it was $45 for 3 hamburgers and 2 French fries from a fast food place that has a lot of guys in their name. I think more than 1, less than 10, which he says sums up the challenges that we will be seeing going into this year moving forward. So commissioners, that's my report. I stand for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Director. Commissioners? Perfect. All right. Well, we'll be at ease until noon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no link there though to the. Okay.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's now 12 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome folks online and in person. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda. If a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Don't think we have any of those requests today, so I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Yeah, second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the regular agenda. We've got an amazing and exciting first item. It's the 21st annual ACT Charity Golf Tournament check presentation to Faces of Hope. Mr. Price.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Steve Price, General Counsel, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I haven't had one like that in a long time.
Don't get used to it.
It's about faces.
So, this is the time and place in which we do the check presentation to this year's charity, Faces of Hope. As you know, certain members of ACHD, every year we organize the ACHD Golf Charity, which is at Spur Wing. This year we had a full boat, 144 golfers, and it most certainly was a great day. We had great weather. I think everybody had a good time. We had BSU players that were auctioned off, and it was a lot of fun. And Faces of Hope was a great partner this year. So with that, we'd like to present to, here, you've seen this check before. This year's golf tournament raised $224,000 for Faces of Hope. There we go. And in doing that, I would also like to thank the members of the golf team. Of course, Stacy is amazing. She took, each year she keeps taking a little bit more responsibility. This year she really did a lot of heavy lifting, so thank you, Stacy. Dean Cooper, well, okay, we had a safe tournament. And Karen and Regina, and I'm going to leave some people out. Jennifer, thank you for attending, and Shandy and Joe, Shuren, and all the other members that we have. But it was a successful tournament, and with that, we'll give you the real money. You can't cash that in the bank, most banks, but in any event, it was a lot of fun, and thank you for supporting staff doing that tournament.
Congratulations.
Come on in. Somebody get in the middle, like Steve, get in the middle. Let's get a little bit more down this way. This way? Yeah, I just don't want the podium in it. Oh, sure. There we go. Okay, ready to go there? And then Karen, can you scoot your All right. Thank you. All right, big smile for me. Look at me. And trunk. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, staff. All right, moving on to the second item. It's the fiscal year 23 fourth quarter impact fee report. Welcome, Ms. Christine Handler.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Christine Tandler, Budget Manager. I'm here to present the fiscal year ending fourth quarter program balance for the Impact Fee Program. Excuse me. We began the year of FY23 with about 9.7 million. We're ending the fourth quarter balance at just about 8.5 million program balance for that. Main impact fee projects. A lot of these are in the right-of-way portion. The bottom two projects, of course, we've just completed construction on. The extraordinary impact fees started the year at 2.8 million, ended the year at just over $3.2 million. Bulk of that related to the West Foothills. And in accordance with amended ordinance 246A, resolution 2331, impact fee program balance has been repaid, or impact fee loan balance has been repaid, and the program balance is $8.5 million. Oh, that's not mine. I will stand for questions. I don't want to do that next one.
Thanks, Christine. Commissioners, any questions?
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney.
Christine, just for my benefit, the impact fee amounts there show an interest earned on those amounts that are being held. How are those funds invested, and what are the sort of restrictions and requirements that relate to how they're invested? I'm just curious about that.
Oh, I'm going
Is it
to
in
pass
treasury
that.
bills?
Yes,
Is it in?
I'm going to pass that on to Sherwin, who's the one that
Oh, okay.
calculates
Great.
those
Thank you.
numbers.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Sherwin Pesca, Treasurer. So Commissioner McKinney, to answer your question, a majority of our investments are invested in the local government investment pool. But we do have a few other investments that are invested in basically vehicles that are allowed by the state statutes. So it's very safe.
I'm sorry, what is it that, what's allowed by state statute?
For instance, CDs, money markets, and so forth.
Okay, so they're pretty much just sort of your what, like the lowest risk commercial
Yes, very
investment
low
type
risk,
thing. So it's
correct.
not restricted to things like treasury bills
No, it's
or that
not.
sort of thing.
Correct.
And you say the local government investment pool, is that primarily what, government bonds, local government bonds and so
It's
on?
a combination of multiple type of investments, not just bonds.
Okay. And so when I look at that slide and it showed 382,000 in interest,
Yes,
what rate of interest does that come out to?
it's about 5%.
Okay, so the
Yes.
district is earning about 5% on the
Exactly.
impact fee funds that it's holding.
Yes,
Okay. All right, thank you.
all right.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the end of our regular agenda items. Is there anyone, moving on to public communications, is there anyone that would like to address the commission at this time? Okay, well, with that, meeting is adjourned. We're gonna go ahead and move into our post-commission agenda. Justin, you're on deck for our master street map and corridor preservation presentation.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Projects here at the Highway District. With me today, we have Edinson Bautista, who helps kind of administer ACHD's master street map and our right-of-way preservation goals. And then also Tom Laws is here, He's the manager of planning here at the Highway District. So there are a few handouts that Stacy's providing, and those I'll be referencing those at some point during the presentation. So Commissioners, today we're here to talk about the Master Street Map, starting with its function and some of the elements that are associated with the Master Street Map. And I just want to remind the Commission of the three primary purposes of the document, the Master Street Map. And these are defined and adopted by the Commission in Policy 3111. The first one, which we're going to focus a little bit on today, is define a shared vision of the future roadway network between ACHD and its partner agencies. And this is really the key part, based on approved comprehensive plans and street typologies. The comprehensive plans are the city's land use planning documents, their long-term visioning documents, and then street typologies references the Livable Street Design Guide, which has a kind of a basic elements that we include in our streets. The other thing we're going to talk quite a bit about today is establish a countywide right-of-way preservation map. And right-of-way preservation in the transportation world has a very specific connotation. We're going to dive right into that today. And then establish an existing and future collector network map, which is another major element of the Master Street Map. We're not going to be talking as much about that today. We're focusing on those top two. Just to highlight, the Master Street Map is really an ACHD specific document. Due to the nature of our agency, this is something that was created back in January of 2010. And yes, I did work at the Highway District at that time. And it was amended last on September 6, 2023, and has been amended on various occasions by the Commission over the years. Typical amendment cycle is every 2 years is what we typically have done. And one key note, this map is intended to help ourselves and the cities be consistent with Idaho Code Section 676517, which clearly outlines the need and the opportunity for cities to establish a future acquisition map, which allows us to preserve right-of-way or get right-of-way through the development process. So just stepping into kind of where the Master Street Map come from and talking a little bit about that vision part of the document. Really the vision for where we're headed as a community is primarily established by our cities and county through their comprehensive plans. The comprehensive plans contain various documents. One of the key documents, though, within the comprehensive plan is called the Future Land Use Map. And it's basically a colorful map that each city maintains that establishes future densities, locations of housing and jobs across their community. Looking out at a document like that, there's usually ranges involved. It's not specific. It's a general planning document that has ranges of densities. It has different opportunities for different types of development. You could have anything from an apartment complex to a Costco that could potentially happen within a certain land use designation. So it's very broad. What happens here in our area and in most areas is there's also what we have is a regional transportation agency called Compass. And that agency is who kind of coordinates all of this planning that happens into the regional transportation plan, which is called Communities in Motion here in Ada and Canyon County, the Treasure Valley, essentially. And that document takes the comprehensive plans as a starting point, but then it actually does demographic projections based on those comprehensive plans, feedback from the city staff about where those that growth is going to occur on certain timeframes. And then those demographics are fed into the transportation demand model, which really is intended to establish and look at and analyze the impacts of growth on the transportation network. And the Master Street Map is kind of an outgrowth of all of this planning where we try to interpret all this and put it in a document saying, okay, here's what everyone's thinking and how are we going to develop a transportation system that responds to all this other planning. And that's the idea behind the shared vision. So graphically, this is kind of what it looks like. This document is taken directly from the most recent Communities in Motion, which was just adopted not too long ago by the Compass Board. So on the screen, you can see there's blue dots, there's red dots, and there's all this kind of growth that's shown here. And so what you can see is the cities basically are provided with a population growth assumption, a number of people and a number of jobs that are going to be projected within their city over a 30-year period. And the cities essentially put that growth on the map. The darker brown and the yellowish areas are areas that are somewhat urbanized already. The white areas are areas where there's not much growth today. And as you can see, I think the vast majority of growth in the two-county area specifically is really indicated in the white areas. So this would be new growth kind of going in areas that is not really urbanized today. These are areas where our facilities exist primarily as the mile grid. You have mile grid arterials, 2 lanes, kind of older farm-to-market roads that have existed for long before the highway district existed. There is quite a bit of growth also shown in the urbanized areas, especially in some of the older communities. Boise has a lot more growth shown in the urbanized parts, but if you look down in the south part of Boise, there is still a lot of growth shown in the unurbanized parts. So it's kind of a mixture across the entire county. And then you can see these dots are essentially translated into numbers up in the top corner there. You can see jobs and population. Just for example, City of Meridian 2020 population estimate was about 123,000. You can see the City of Meridian 2050 population is almost 200,000. And so that's substantial growth. Not all areas are like the Treasure Valley. This, as it goes across the United States, is one of the fastest growing areas in the United States by basically every metric. So how do we deal with this growth and this projections that come through the cities and the Communities in Motion plan? It's challenging in one specific way, and I wanted to highlight that today as one of the key parts of this presentation. And you can see this idea of time constraint. And this is where it makes it challenging from a transportation perspective. Comprehensive plans and the master street map are generally unconstrained by time. So the growth shown in most cities' comprehensive plans is not represented here. This is only a portion of the growth that could occur within a city's area of impact. And you say, well, what's the controlling factor? 30 years is the controlling factor as approved by the Compass Board. But there is a lot more growth beyond what is shown on that previous map that has potential here in our area. And the comprehensive plans basically represent all of that growth in one way or another. And the master street map also is intended to try and capture a longer term vision than just what is the 20 or 30 years. And you ask, well, why? And it goes into the idea of we want to really take the long view. You know, we don't want to be planning just on a 20-year or 30-year time frame in an area like this where there's so much available land for growth and development potential. I think it's pretty consistent among agencies like ours, cities, counties, highway districts, to really say, you know, we need to be looking long term. Now, when it comes to time constraints, there's basically 3 major categories we talk about. 5 years, which is generally ACHD's integrated 5-year work plan, and kind of the short-term capital plans that are developed by agencies. That's pretty sure. You know, we're pretty good at 5 years. We can, you know, our crystal ball in that time frame is pretty good. 20 years, you know, it gets a little murkier, but we do our best using the tools we have. And then 30 years is what you've seen. It's our best guess at what's going to happen based on trends, data that we have available and things like that. Now, what happens with the economy when things go up and down, that can have a significant impact on the growth and how fast or how slow it occurs. Back in 2007, 2008, during the Great Recession, the growth rate in Ada County specifically dropped dramatically during that time frame. But since then, it has picked up and even increased beyond what it was before then. And so it really just depends on a lot of factors that are largely out of ACHD's control. So with that said, and this is kind of jumping into the heart of the presentation here, the idea of right-of-way preservation as a key function for the highway district really falls right in the middle of this conversation. Because when we're doing right-of-way preservation, essentially what we're doing is when a development comes in, we have an opportunity. It's this unique time where we can say to that developer, we see what you're trying to do, and we need some land now during your development process, typically the subdivision process, to be preserved for a future corridor. Maybe the roadway in front of your development right now is just 2 lanes, and we understand that. But looking long-term, looking at our plans and our vision, we need more space. And this is very successful. Developers understand this, they support it, and I can't think of a time when we've had a major issue with a developer when it comes to right-of-way preservation. This is a process that is very, very smooth. It really is essential because it allows us to think to the future and give ourselves options of what we could do in the future and what the vision may be for our county. It certainly saves money because we're essentially getting land that if we did not get through the development process, sometimes that land could be an exaction. Sometimes it is impact fees that are used to pay for that land. It depends, but we're getting it at today's prices, where if we went down the road and we tried to buy it 10, 15 years from now when we needed it for the project, not only would it be way more expensive, the process to do that, if we didn't get it at the time and the development was closer, now we're impacting landscaping and potentially backyards and all of those things, which make it way more complicated and way more expensive. So it really does save a lot of money. And establishes multimodal corridors. Much of the right-of-way that we're preserving for is not used for just roadway expansion. It's used for pathways. It is used for the pedestrian and bike facilities that the commission directs us for. It could potentially be used for transit facilities and other things like that. So when we're getting it at the development, we have a vision for what we think it could be used for, but that vision could change. But if we have the space, then it's just a matter of deciding at the time of the project what we want to do, which goes to the point of flexibility. The picture, you can see Lake Hazel corridor. It's a good picture of a right-of-way preservation. You can see the 2-lane road of Lake Hazel that's been there many, many years. And then you see those sidewalks and landscaping that's pushed way back with kind of the drainage, just standard borrow ditch there. And that all happened through right-of-way preservation in the development process. And when we go in and widen Lake Hazel, we're going to be able to do that with very limited right-of-way acquisition and limited right-of-way impacts because we preserve for it, in this case, many, many years ago. So how does the master street map play into all of this? And this is what we wanted to discuss today. There's kind of 4 different categories that the master street map has kind of embedded in the document. You always see a map for the master street map. Behind the map is basically an Excel spreadsheet of columns and tables that when you click on the map, you get all this information, and this information is embedded within the document. And so the main categories we look at are existing number of lanes, which is just what it is today. And you'll see number of lanes is kind of throughout here, but there's 2 different things we'll talk about. Oftentimes that could be 2 or 3. Typically it's 2 because most of the areas where we're preserving right-of-way for along our arterial grid are 2-lane roads. They've never been widened, many of them, and they've just existed in their 2-lane configuration for many years. Plan lanes for construction. Now this is interesting. It really represents what our CIP is indicating as a need within a 20-year time frame. So this is where that time constraint starts to play into the master street map, because we have this existing number of lanes, which is where we are now. We want to document what our CIP is indicating that we need within a 20-year time frame. Is that all we will ever need? In some corridors, maybe it is. In some corridors, maybe it's not. And so that's a question that comes up depending on the development projections. But that plan lanes for construction is typically documented in our CIP. Plan lanes for preservation, and this is where this is kind of that longer term view, which is the number of lanes we plan for in the long-term preservation scenario. This is where we would be looking at, maybe it's 2 lanes today. Maybe the need in our CIP only shows a 3-lane road that's needed within a 20-year time frame. But maybe that area, we believe there's a lot more growth than just 20-year potential out in that area. So we may recommend 5 lanes as a preservation tool in an area like that. And then there's the last one. I think this is actually the one that's the most important. This is the dimension that we actually are going to preserve for. And generally, those dimensions line up 2, 50, 378, 5, 100, 7, 124. And that dimension is based on just a cross-section of a roadway we want to build in the future. The multi-use pathway fits in that cross-section. Detached sidewalks, the bike facilities that we've talked about fit in that cross-section. But it doesn't necessarily have to match the planned right-of-way footprint 2, 3, 5, 7. There are times when the planned lanes for construction may be 3, but the planned right-of-way footprint, we may recommend 100, because looking in that longer view, we believe that it's wiser to preserve a little bit more and have that flexibility in those options rather than lock ourselves in, only have 78, knowing that based on development patterns, it's likely that we will need more, even if it falls out of the 20-year time frame. That happens on some corridors. A lot of corridors, they match. It's 5 and it's 100. If you look at the master street map, a lot of times it's going to match. Sometimes it's not going to match, and that's in the areas where we don't know as much and we don't have as much information. So this is one of the key things I wanted to throw up there today, just to kind of make some of those connections between. I think we talk a lot about the lanes for preservation and the lanes and talking about that, but the dimension is actually the key thing that when we're through the development process that we need. Because the developer, they're not deciding on number of lanes. That's an ACHD decision down the road when we get to the project. What we really need there is a dimension. We need 50 feet from you from center line. We need, this much feet from center line of the roadway to deal with the development. So how does this look on our map? And I'm focusing right now on the planned lanes for preservation, because I know that's been a topic that has come up on several occasions recently. So, and this is on that map in front of you, just to highlight where we're at. You can see in general, across our county, you can see there's basically 3 colors that pop up here. And this is once again the category planned lanes for preservation, not the CIP. This is just the preservation in the master street map. Purple, 2 to 3, quite a bit of that, especially as you get into the outskirts of the county, the areas not as close to the core. The green is 4 to 5, which is the majority of the main roads that most of us drive on or access every day. And then the blue is actually 6 to 7, and there's some very specific corridors, Fairview, State Street, and Overland, and then the Cunamore corridor, which we're preserving long-term as kind of a southern access route. Those are the 6 to 7 lane roadways that we're looking at. And so I wanted you to have this map. I know there's been questions about this in the past, about what are we doing, how many lanes, what is our preservation, and this is the map that is available for your reference when we're talking about lanes for preservation. Most of the time, oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
But see, Justin, I think this is helpful, but I think even on the key, it says, lanes versus dimensions,
yeah.
Right? So have you thought about expanding or providing like a filter that shows the actual width of the preservation that we're talking about?
And Madam President, absolutely. We could provide a companion map that shows you the width. Most of the time it's going to be the same. There are some examples where it's not, and we can absolutely provide that.
And I really appreciate you mentioning that in your earlier slide, because that has come up in the State Street project, in the downtown State Street project, and also in the larger corridor discussion, because people will say, well, we've got existing 4 lanes, right? And then I'm like, and then we've had conversations about, well, within this existing right of way, let's stick with that, and whatever configuration works best. That sounds good, but sometimes even in how we describe that to various partners and constituents, they think they get attached to it's easy to just say, well, I know what a 2-lane road or a 2-lane boulevard or a 3-lane or a 4-lane road looks like. So that's what I hear you saying versus the actual physical width of the right of way. So I feel like, again, I know that this is going to be an ongoing challenge because it's speaking a different language in a lot of ways to our folks that care about the width of our roadways. But I think the more just general piece of advice, like the more we can offer that flexibility of this is physically how wide this would be and to your point, this could look like a lot of options. It doesn't have to be 5 lanes. It could be 4 with really cool off ramps, because I think that's also been something that the city of Meridian has brought up to me as well, that they want like those ideas. And the more I think we get flexible in describing, this is what this looks like. It doesn't always have to be a 5-lane continuous center lane, right? We know that's not always the best option. So thank you for listening, Justin.
And Madam President, Commissioners, no, thanks for that statement. And I think it's such an important clarification that what we build is not dictated by any of the documents I'm talking about today. It is not dictated by that. The decision of what we're actually going to construct happens at the project level. And when we're going through the design phase and we're in the integrated 5-year work plan and we're talking about the specific design alternatives that match the vision at that moment. And I think you're right that we get caught up in this 5 versus 4 versus 3 lanes. And I think it's a little unfortunate sometimes because it's like, oh, it says 5 lanes in the master street map, and therefore it's definitely going to be a 5-lane road. That's not technically true. We're using that 5-lane idea because at the time when we developed the map, it was the basis of conversation to define a footprint. And we want to be able to at least accommodate 5 lanes within this footprint. Mm-hmm. But could you accommodate something different? Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do, and we have, and that happens when we get closer to the project process.
And I appreciate you saying that, Justin, because I think as we start having more flexibility, building out different types of road configurations within these 4 or 5 lane, or even 6 or 7 lane arterials, I think constituents in our cities are going to have a better idea of what they can request. But I think the framing that you just described is paramount, because people do read this and they think that just automatically means that that's what's going to get built, because that nuance is lost on them. So, because they don't understand the background and context. But Commissioner Hanson, did you have something?
Madam President, that's brilliant. I would agree with you. I've been on this commission for 11 years, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because my frustration over the years, and you've heard me say, is when did we decide that this was the design for this? And I would get the references, well, it was decided when you approved the CIP. I said, where in the CIP? Well, the CIP refers back to the lane configuration in the master street map. So then it's left with the commission. Oh, well, somebody in the past has already made the decision, and therefore we can move forward to acquire right away with this design concept of the number of lanes in mind. And so I think that to legally be more consistent, it should be referenced as the actual width that we're going for, so that we preserve whatever that configuration looks like for the time when the commission reviews what's with the city and the county, what is the appropriate design. And we don't say, oh, that was made years ago, back when we laid out this map that said, this is what roughly the design will be. So I think that's a really, really critical point. And I think it should change to what are the dimensions that we're going to seek to preserve in this corridor.
And commissioners, thank you for these comments. And that is why the right-of-way footprint dimension was included in the master street map. And that is the dimension that we reference with the developers and through the process of development. We don't reference 4 or 5, that's not reference. That's a tool that we use to arrive at the dimension, but and to give us that flexibility that I've discussed today. But what's referenced is that key dimension, and that's what's referenced in the documents and the staff reports when we say, okay, we need, typically you'll see 50 foot from center line on a typical arterial development, because that was derived from a 5-lane cross section, but there's a lot of other things that go into that for sure. So to jump in on some examples, and I think this will help the conversation also. We've received feedback not only from the commission, from the city, and you have the City of Meridian's most recent letter related to McMillan in front of you today. And I just kind of highlighted some different spots, and I'm showing you those same 4 categories that are in the master street map. What you're seeing, the dimensions and the numbers here, are directly from the master street map. This is not a proposal. This is what's adopted today. McMillan west of Locust Grove is an interesting example because it's a section line roadway. And we do get this question every now and then of, well, don't you just preserve and build 5 lanes on all section line roadways or preserve 100 feet if we want to change the language? And the answer is no, we have not historically. There have been some corridors where we have made a decision under the commission's direction to actually preserve less than 100 feet and to kind of focus on a corridor that is not as wide when it comes to vehicular lanes. And you can see that. McMillan is one of the poster childs of this decision that was previously made. And the question is, well, why was that decision made and how was that decision made? And I'm not going to give you the whole history, but McMillan's a unique corridor. It does have a canal. It does have significant power poles. And there were some planning documents that were created back in the late 90s and early 2000s that indicated from the city of Meridian in coordination with ACHD that they wanted a different vision for this corridor. And so we took that vision and implemented it into the first adopted master street map. And from 2010, those numbers have never changed in the master street map on McMillan. And then over here we are, many years later, 14, 15 years later, and the city has recently indicated, and you have the letter in front of you, that they feel like this may have been short-sighted, that maybe we should have been doing more on McMillan all these years. And I'm not going to get into the right or wrong of that assertion. I'm just here to say this is what we've done so far. And I do think it's worth stating, though, that because we have only preserved for 78 feet along McMillan for this last 15-year period and even longer than that, it would be very difficult now to fit a 5-lane, even a 4-lane facility because of the intersections on McMillan now because we did not preserve the space. So this is actually an example where we made a decision as an agency, we preserved an amount, and here we are today with a potential desire for change from one of the communities. And to change it would be very difficult and expensive and have broad financial impacts on the highway district. If we were to say yes, absolutely, now McMillan's going to be 5 lanes, we missed a lot of opportunities to preserve that 5-lane corridor over the years on McMillan. So I'm throwing that out as an example. I'm not asking for you to take any action today. I thought it fit, though, well within the context of this conversation.
Madam President.
Commissioner Hanson.
But just while we're on that thought, it seems to me that, we've learned from experiences. There are other examples where we may have preserved more and we don't need it. We didn't preserve Warm Springs, but we got it as a state highway. And we said, well, we got to look at all this space. We'll just call it a 5-lane on the master street map. And clearly that was not appropriate. We've changed that. We've updated that. But now we're stuck with a whole bunch of right-of-way that we have to figure out how to do it. And so erring on the side of, well, the development is going to move forward depending on the number of feet you preserved. Have we ever thought of looking at, okay, we're going to preserve for 100. So ACHD still has 100. But what we would like to do, because we understand you may change your mind, and once development has all happened, you don't need that, to allow development, leasing of that land to build development closer to the road. Because what happens is if we say we've preserved it, then we don't have the vertical infrastructure that helps to improve the ability to have walking, biking, commercial facilities, those sorts of things along the corridor. Everything's sort of pushed back, and their back is to it, so that we preserve it. But we then, in an interim period, 30 years or something, we allow for construction and leasing of facilities on ACHD right-of-way, so that then down the road, when full build-out happens, we and the cities can revisit that and say, okay, now we're going to change it. It's obviously a heck of a lot easier if we have to, remove buildings that's on our own land. And that's the decision the city's made, and it's not owned by somebody, as opposed to trying to condemn someone's property because we didn't preserve enough.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, no, ACHD hasn't ever looked at that specific scenario. And I think there's a lot of complexity associated with that idea, associated with the installation of buildings and infrastructure and a lot of investment that would go in that we are saying would potentially need to be removed. I don't know if, in my experience with development and with developers, they look at the long term too, and I don't see it as extremely likely that they would want to make those types of investments on land that they did not own. I think there's often financing and other issues that could arise with that, but it's an interesting idea.
I was just going to say that might get at this issue of, well, then condemning property at a very high cost once it's been developed.
The other recent example discussed by the commission, Amity, Meridian to Locust Grove, and as you remember, we discussed this recently with the Amity and Locust Grove project, the roundabout project we've been kind of contemplating there. This is one where the existing lanes are obviously two. The planned lanes for construction, and this is represented in ACHD CIP, which means that the traffic demand within a 20-year period, as shown by ACHD CIP, certainly indicates the need for 5 lanes. This is where the preservation and the construction match 5 lanes, and ACHD has and would plan to preserve for 100 feet. And I think there was some discussion amongst the city and maybe the commission that, well, we don't really need Amity at 5 lanes in this segment. Maybe it should only be 3. And I think that's a really interesting and valid conversation. But one thing I wanted to kind of clarify today is the commission certainly has the ability to direct staff through the CIP and through the integrated 5-year work plan to pursue a certain cross-section. But what I want to clarify is I don't believe it's the commission's intent to modify the right-of-way footprint for preservation column. And that's the nuance that sometimes it's hard to understand because everyone says, we only want 3 lanes. And I hear, okay, well, that could go a couple of different ways, right? We could say, absolutely, we're going to pursue a 3-lane cross-section with a project, but ultimately we're going to try and preserve the 100 feet for a potentially different corridor in the future. And we've done that on certain corridors. Beacon Light is a corridor where we've done that. There's other corridors where that exists. And I think that starts to match potentially the commission or members of the commission's intent and not take away the flexibility. And I think that's I'm obviously trying to walk a tightrope today, and I'm not being too, I'm trying to be obvious about it. But I think that area is where we maintain the long-term planning, the long-term vision, knowing that the county is rapidly growing and there's lots of potential changes in the future, but it gives the commission to maybe achieve some shorter term 5 or 20-year goals on certain corridors without taking away some of those longer term goals. Locust Grove, Amity to Victory in that same area. This is another one like McMillan where years ago we decided to only preserve for 3 and preserve that 78 feet. And the city has also indicated on various occasions that they may want a wider corridor there also. And those are the ones that are hard. Because I can easily say, sure, commissioners, go ahead and change it to 100. But our opportunities to change the right-of-way corridor, because most of it has been preserved, it'll change on this list. It won't really change the reality of what's out there. And that's just one of the facts of preservation is something that happens over years and years and years. And if you change your mind after those years and years and years, most of the opportunity is lost. So shifting into the CIP, and I think this is a key link that I wanted to make today, which is this is that 20-year plan. This is not a build-out plan. And there's differences between what is shown on the CIP when it comes to lanes and what is shown in the master street map when it comes to preservation and potentially lanes also. Some examples of that. You can see South 10 Mile Road here. This is a corridor that connects to the freeway. Our 20-year CIP indicates 3 lanes as needed improvements within that 20-year time frame. And it's based on the travel demands and the traffic that is anticipated within 20 years. But our master street map and our long-term preservation indicates a broader, wider corridor than that beyond what our CIP shows. And the reason for that is really simple. It goes back to that idea of time constraints. CUNA is at an earlier phase of development than Meridian or Boise. So we know that that CUNA will continue to develop, and there's areas along 10 Mile that will develop over this next 20 years. Will it develop enough to trigger that 5-lane need within the CIP? No, our CIP doesn't show that, at least our adopted CIP. We're working on the one now. But we know, though, because this corridor connects to the freeway, because it's a main route between the freeway and CUNA, we know that longer term, to say that 10 Mile is likely going to operate well as a 3-lane roadway seems very short-sighted. So in our master street map, 10 Mile shows 5 lanes for preservation and an 100 footprint. And so that's just an example of what we're talking about today and how these documents all work together. It's not totally perfect, and sometimes it does certainly get confusing of, well, our CIP says only 3 lanes, and therefore then why are we looking at something wider? Well, it's because we know the CIP is time constrained, and growth in CUNA is certainly not time constrained. And so that's how we take some of those accounts and some of those variables into account. So how do we deal with this in the CIP? And we actually have a very specific way to deal with this in the CIP, and it's actually called constrained roads. And this is a map that is adopted into the ACHD CIP. And these are corridors where the traffic demand, the projected demand or volume, exceeds the planning thresholds that we've established in the peak hour. It's a peak hour model. But the commission, through previous discussions on the CIP and the master street map, has said, we understand this, but we don't want to have those roads match whatever that demand might be. You can see McMillan's on the list here, Beacon Light's on the list here, sections of Victory are on the list, sections of 5 Mile are on the list. There's quite a few of these where if we just had an unconstrained travel demand situation, we would say all of these roads on this list would need more right-of-way and way bigger footprint. Some of these show the need for 7 lanes. So you're not talking about 3 to 5, it's 5 to 7. And that historically has been a very kind of topic the commission has really honed in on, is how many 7-lane or how many really wide corridors do we want in our valley? And there's been a desire to, in many ways, not have as many of those, which is where you get some of this constrained map. But this discussion occurs through the CIP. The master street map certainly plays into that and is kind of a variable that goes in. And then through the decision process, the master street map can feed into the CIP, and the CIP can feed right back into the master street map. And this is a place where a lot of those discussions occur. And it's nice to do it here because with the CIP, we actually have data. We have traffic, travel, demand analysis. We have demographic analysis. The master street map doesn't have that level of data, much like a city's comprehensive plan doesn't have the data to know what's going to happen in 100 years. The CIP does have that 20-year data that we can work with. And if a roadway is like just barely meeting within the 20 years a 3-lane threshold, and we look at it and go, and it's not even taking into account all of the growth that's possible, then we can go, yeah, although our CIP only shows 3 lanes and we can only collect impact fees for those extra lanes, we really believe that it should be a larger corridor than that. And those are the kind of conversations that occur. So, trying to wrap this up, and I know I've taken a lot of time today, and I appreciate your consideration. I just want to highlight that right-of-way preservation is one of those functions at the Highway District, if there was any function, that requires a proactive, long-term planning approach, especially in fast-growing areas. And if it just really, it requires us to see what could be in the future, and to be realistic about it as much as we can, based on the city's development patterns. And that's hard because there's different opinions about that. And ACHD, I think we've seen it at the staff level, our role is to not necessarily question the city's vision, it's try and accommodate that with good right-of-way preservation practices. Rapid and sometimes unexpected growth creates challenges. I'll use a couple examples. I think, and this is not in any way to disparage any recent decisions, but Owyhee High School, where my kids go to school, it's an interesting land use, scenario and model. It's a high school that was placed out in a largely undeveloped area, several miles from the nearest kind of urban area. And it created a lot of transportation challenges because a high school is one of the highest demand users in the morning peak hour, for sure. Has a lot of pedestrian bicycle demands. But from a traffic generation perspective, high schools are one of the highest you get. Just tons of cars, show up at a certain time of day and leave at a certain time of day. And so this high school was placed out there, and it put immediate stress on ACHD's system, on USTIC, on McMillan, and it was one of those things that it was decided, it was built, and ACHD had to scramble a little bit to try and get some infrastructure in to support that high school, specifically a signal at USTIC and Black Cat. The high school put in a few signals in the immediate vicinity of the high school, some interim facilities, but downstream, because those kids were coming from so far away, there were downstream impacts that fell outside of what the high school was responsible for. So that's what I'm talking about when we're saying unexpected impacts. It's just a reality of the land use transportation dynamic. When a corridor is constrained, and this goes to the constrained corridors conversation, parallel corridors will be impacted. And that's something we always have to remember. If you constrain one, the traffic's going to go somewhere. And if you have a 3-lane corridor and we know the travel demand model says it probably needs 5, that traffic doesn't just disappear, it is rerouted in the network to some other location. How and where it goes, that's a function of modeling. But I think it's worth considering that it's not a closed system, that that things have to happen to accommodate the future traffic demands. If right-of-way is not preserved, it reduces options. And that could be all kinds of options. It could be technology. It could be transit infrastructure. It could be a change in how we deal with automated vehicles. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen. And I think it's hard for me to see a scenario where ACHD will regret having extra right-of-way. Because what do you end up with if you follow out the conversation? So there's a little more space. So we could potentially detach our pathways further. We could potentially have a space for drones to land and operate within the delivery function of this. Who knows, right? And so it's hard for me to see a scenario where we would regret having extra right-of-way. I may be wrong there, but it's when you think to the future, I can't think of an agency that has thought, I just wish we wouldn't have preserved so much right-of-way. I don't think it's happened in fast-growing areas like ours. The number of lanes, and this goes to one of the key points today, is finalized during the integrated 5-year work plan and the design process. And this is a clear distinction. The master street map and the policy actually says this. This isn't my language. This is written into the policy by the commission, that the final decision on lane configuration happens as we get the project in the integrated 5-year work plan and as we go through the design. Now, yes, are we making assumptions based on the CIP and the master street map? Yes, staff would ultimately, as a starting point, we would start with the foundational documents and say, okay, based on the master street map and the CIP, this is where we're starting. But if the commission is reviewing it and says, we appreciate that, but we want you to go a different direction, that's the integrated 5-year work plan. It's the whole point of that process. We only have one shot at preservation. When developers come in and do subdivisions of the type and the volume that we see in our county, it really is the opportunity for ACHD to make these decisions. And I think, and I'll say it kind of in a funny way, but it's probably a little better to miss big than it is to miss small. Because if we miss small, we take away options. If we miss a little big, I think it just gives us more options in the future. So that being said, next steps on this conversation and how we decide to go forward. ACHD is in the process right now of updating its capital improvements plan. This is one of our foundational documents. There's a lot of analysis that the commission has specifically requested as part of this CIP update. And we're in the process of going through that analysis right now. And we think it's a critical piece to this broader conversation. Through that CIP process, there will be a comprehensive review of the constrained roadway segments and the planned lanes for construction as part of the CIP. This process will be data supported. It will include trade-offs and impacts as part of the CIP. And there may be times when we say, you know what, we've missed it and we think we want to go down. Or maybe there's times when we say, you know what, the CIP is saying 3 lanes, but this growth area doesn't feel like that's adequate and we want to go a little higher. And those are the conversations that occur. As part of all of that, we will identify changes and adjustments in full coordination with the commission and our partner agencies. And I think that's key. They have a lot of, the cities have a lot of interest in this conversation, and I think it's important to do it with them. And so they're fully engaged in this. And then finalize the CIP and incorporate outcomes into the master street map. That would be the general process that staff would like to pursue to really provide some structure around this conversation and hopefully have a good outcome. There's different ways to do it, but this would be the next steps as proposed today. So with that said, I'll stand for any questions that you may have, and thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Justin. Commissioners?
Yep.
Commissioner Hanson?
I have a few. Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate the thoughtful look at what is preservation, and just as what was raised earlier, and now is the opportunity to make it crystal clear that we're talking about preservation of a certain width. We are not making decisions about a design or a lane configuration. We should make that by the way in which we reference those in the master street map and the capital improvements plan. I think that's important, really important, make it crystal clear. We will make the design, or future commissions will make the design decisions about lane configurations in the 5-year integrated work plan. That's where it's going to happen. The second is, so I support the notion that we need to, move forward, sometimes preserve more land than we might need, but we then need to make a different change within the agency to allow the use on the land in the interim. Because what's happened is that we have to constantly have these joint agreements with the city to do landscaping or drainage or other uses, so the land doesn't get used. So the corridor develops with nothing happening on either side until we're ready. So we need to think about being much more creative about the use of that right-of-way to the value of those neighborhoods and businesses in the city, and be partners with the city. Okay, we're going to preserve 100 feet. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. In the interim, we need to work with you. It might be a parkway, these what are they called? Horizontal parks, linear parks. There could be all kinds of things. So in moving forward, let's figure out something so that we're partnering with them and not waiting until they come up with something and come to us and we say, we don't do that. But it's clearly, we're taking land from a private owner, we're taking it off the tax rolls, and it's going to be a long period perhaps before it's used for transportation related issues. So I think we really need to change something else as we're defining what that is. What we haven't done, because the entire focus is on the 1 mile corridors. And of course, the fact that we haven't preserved collector roads, we don't have quarter mile, third mile, even half mile in many places, collector roads that are used for moving traffic that could alleviate those demands. And the reason why we identify those demands on the arterial, on the mile segments, is because there isn't that connectivity. So, and I'm not sure if it's too late. But I think the master street map should say these are the areas we really want to push forward with third mile, quarter mile collector systems. And maybe especially like around the Wahi School is something that we need to be very intentional about, because we've learned that, you could have 3 lanes, you could have 5 lanes, you could have 7 lanes, but if there ain't no connectivity for a couple miles, except for another arterial a mile away, there's going to be congestion. It doesn't matter how many lanes you can put on it. The reason we have congestion is because we have the growth, and the development patterns have eliminated the connectivity, the collector roads. Going into it, people know, okay, these are collector roads. I'm going to drive through them. We're bumping up against Canyon County. Canyon County doesn't have a countywide highway district. Does Canyon County have a master street map like this?
Madam President, members of the commission. So there is a functional classification map that's a federally required document that kind of mimics our master street map, and Canyon County primarily relies on that. That's administered by Compass. So there is a lot of good coordination when it comes to those cross-county connections. It's probably not perfect, but there is a lot of coordination there.
So the thing that I've observed is because we do have a master street map and we do project out what our arterials are going to be down, for example, in the CUNA area, we sort of telegraph to developers, this is where we're going to have this network of arterial roads. That doesn't exist as well in Canyon County. And so even though Middleton and that area just west of the county line actually has probably better options for water and other resources, development's being driven down by CUNA, where they're going to run up against, they already are running up against other issues related to water and development. And I looked on the map, and yeah, we show more densities around CUNA than we do around Middleton, which seems just kind of odd to me but I thought, wonder if that's a product of having a countywide highway district that projects out where those arterials are going to be and that they will be of these sizes. And so we've sort of encouraged development in certain areas and not in other areas in the valley, because of course, to us, the line ends at the county line.
Well, Madam President, just a point of clarification, the transportation network is an outcome of the demographic projections. It's not an input to it. So what happens is that through the demographic advisory committee under Compass, each community is allocated a certain amount of growth, and then they kind of geographically position that growth within their community. So it may be true that Middleton is faster growing than CUNA. I don't believe that's true, but it just depends on. It's not the transportation network that drives that conversation. It's really the demographic allocations and the growth projections.
Okay. One question: the one term that is used in our typologies, you haven't mentioned it at all, is the notion of a mobility corridor. We've designated what are the mobility corridors. Lake Hazel's a mobility corridor. Perhaps Lake Hazel we should really seriously think about as being bigger than 4, 5, 6 lanes, because it will connect with the Eisenman interchange, and it looks like Cunamora Road is a mobility corridor.
Correct.
So that sort of nuance or detail I think is really important, so that as development happens, they understand a mobility corridor. It's about moving as much volume of traffic. And then the next arterial just to the north or just to the south is not a mobility corridor. The mobility corridor doesn't happen so we have a clear view. We're not just stumbling into it. We're sort of targeting, this is where we're putting, encouraging more traffic to go. And I think we should do that. And it seems to me, ITD, I noticed that Three Cities River Crossing is referenced on here, but we don't do anything with it because it's a state highway. And that's the other thing, is how much of this can be absorbed by the shifting of these to state highways, because these are state highways. One last thing is you still have Jefferson Street on here. Oh. It hasn't been ours for 6 years.
Thanks, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner McKinney, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Just quickly, Justin, thanks for this information. And the key question in my mind, and you've more or less answered it, was how are we going to identify these places where we maybe have messed up in the past? And I think, you discussed McMillan Road. I think that's a good example of someplace where the commission, where the district has made some mistakes in the past in not preserving enough right of way. What's funny is that I've for a long time felt that McMillan should be a 5-lane corridor, and it's primarily because I've seen the congestion there every morning, every afternoon, and back just a few years ago, the response I got when mentioning that was that, well, as soon as Chinden is fully widened and Ustick is widened out to its 5-lane, that'll draw that traffic off, and you'll see congestion go down there. And that's not at all the case. That hasn't happened at all. It's a parking lot every morning and every evening. And so I look at that and I say that's an opportunity missed, sadly. And so my question is, and you've talked about reviewing all these constrained corridors that we were talking about and reviewing them to see which ones. It seems to be, approach number one ought to be a presumption that if a constrained corridor, if the future traffic projections are, borderline, does it need to be a 3-lane or a 5-lane? That tells me you need to go up, not down. We need to preserve for the bigger option, simply because we may get to a position like we have with McMillan that now we're constrained and we have no place to build and to get the extra space that we need for the traffic that's there. There are portions of McMillan out toward the west, near the high school, where we have that opportunity going forward to fix these mistakes and not repeat them. But in any case, that's my key question is, what are we going to do going forward so we don't make these mistakes again? And then the next question is, we've got this letter here, this specific request from Meridian Mayor saying, we'd like, this needs to be a 5-lane corridor. I'm in agreement with them. What do we need to do to make this happen?
I can answer that second question if you don't mind, Justin. So I've chatted with the mayor and we want to have a joint work session to talk more about it because our staff want to provide some deeper analysis about how much right of way we do have, where we could expand to the full capacity versus where we could have it just as 4 lanes or keep it, and the mayor was really supportive of that type of conversation. So kind of getting in the weeds, and we would potentially do that after in the new year. So that's when we would have those conversations. Justin, I just want to say thank you for this great presentation. Thanks, Tom and Ensign, for being here. I think the way that you've described this linear process and framing of these various documents was really helpful for me. And I think it's going to set the stage for some bigger conversations that we've needed to have for quite some time. And I do want to echo Commissioner Hansen's point about we're still saying lanes. We need to start saying feet of right of way. We need to start doing that because I think that prevents this lens that this is this initial bias that this is what it's going to be, which created some challenges, I think, in my own self when you guys have come to us saying, hey, we've got this preservation or this corridor piece. And I'm like, but we're not ready for that type of project yet, right? Maybe we definitely could be in 10 to 15 years from now, but just not right now. So it'll help not only, I think, the population, our public in our cities, but also I think commissioners being able to distinguish what are we talking about right now. So if we could just kind of progressively learn and try to do that, I think that would be really helpful. And then just a little quick note, I went to Illinois to visit some family a couple weeks ago. And I think we always can get really comfy being in our bubble of Ada County and, this experience of rapid growth and things being really new, because it was such a great reminder about what happens when you are working with really old infrastructure. And I had to like nerd out a little bit and took some pictures. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a terrible intersection. This is a terrible ramp. And I just know, it comes down to improper planning and preservation and all of those things, right? And there's so many things, like to your point, Justin, that we can't foresee. There's so much technology and new ideas that haven't even been thought of yet. So I really appreciate your forward thinking and directing the commission in this way. So, all right. Thanks, Justin. I know. All right. Our next item is the speed management policy update. Mr. Ryan Head.
Madam President, Commission, for the record, Ryan Head, Deputy Director, Development and Technical Services. I'm here today to give you just an information briefing on our speed management policy. And first and foremost, my message is we've been working hard since the last time that we had a conversation on this, but we still have some work we need to do. And so really, the first thing I want to present to you is just an updated and revised schedule. So here we are just to talk about the schedule today, to talk about kind of where we've been. We're not, as you noticed, we didn't give you any draft language. That's not really what we're here today to do. Here's just from moving forward, the thought would be that we would come back to you with a draft, work over the next few months to really come up with and really get into the details of how others are doing this, what some good ways to handle this in creative and positive ways, and come back with the draft in February, assuming that looks good at that time, and we would take it out to the public and with the intent to have a hearing at the end of April. The other thing, last time we talked, there was a lot of conversation around how's the online petition process work. And so we've had now the opportunity to test this out and wanted to give you an example today of what that looked like. The location where we tested this was Camas Street in Boise. This is on this particular section of roadway, there were 53 properties that were adjacent to it. Based on current policy, and again, that's what we're working off of, is our current existing policy. The requirement was for 75% of those to be in support of the request, which would have been 40 of those individuals or households participating. We had this open for a 2-week period, and so I just wanted to show the commission what that petition looked like. This is on ACHD's Engagement HQ platform. Really provides us a lot of opportunity to provide information and to get information from the public. So what was sent? We sent out a mailer to the affected households, giving them a QR code where they could jump on here. They also could sign it in writing, but the direction was to come here and take this online survey. So when they got here, there was a description indicating that there has been a request made for traffic calming on that street. We did a traffic study, and it qualifies from the vehicle speed perspective, and then said, okay, so what's the option? Recognizing our existing policy really is focused on speed cushions, speed bumps. That was the example we gave to show people this is what this could look like. We gave some advantages and disadvantages, really focusing on, from an advantage perspective, on the impact it can have in terms of the availability of the traffic calming 24/7, the speeds that generally it has an impact, the benefit of having those brakes in there. But also talking about some of maybe the negative side too, so people understood it can be noisy when people go over these things. It may have an impact on our maintenance, our street sweeping, as well as how emergency vehicles go through that area. We gave them a map of the affected area, so this is where Camas is, and then we have just the question portion, just asking name, address, email address, so we could keep communicating with them on this topic. Because our existing policy does indicate it does have to be a property owner, that's what the current policy says. We did ask, what's your connection to the property? And then we also then asked the question of yes or no. Our current handwritten policy, our petition process, really opens it up and only gives people the option to say, yes, I'm going to sign, or no, I'm not going to sign, right? And so we only get the feedback from those. One of the benefits of this we have is people can say, no, I don't support it. So jumping back, I wanted to show you the results of what came out of this. So mentioned again, we'd need 40 to participate or to say, yes, they approve. Through the 2-week period that we had this open, we had 36 surveys submitted. So right there, we actually didn't even have enough that would have got them over the 75% threshold. That's 67%. Of those surveys submitted, we had a couple households that submitted more than one vote, multiple people in the household. So there were just 34 unique households or residents there. Of those households, 22 said that they supported. So that's 42% of the overall total number of affected properties said that they supported.
No.
Is that property owners, Ryan?
Correct.
Yeah, 22 household, yeah, property owners.
They had to be owners in this case.
According to our
That's the
existing policy, yes.
Versus participants.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
If we looked at this a little differently, when we do typical public outreach, if you got to participate to give your voice, right? And so we also looked at it and said, if you just looked at how many of the participants said they supported it, those who chose to engage, that would have been 65%. Now, this comes into the conversation about what's the threshold, right? At 75% threshold, it wouldn't have passed. And so under current policy, this would not pass for traffic calming. But I think it begs the question in terms of how do we use this, right? The current approach with the handwritten has an individual going door to door, getting signatures. We actually allow them up to 6 months to provide that feedback. We give them kind of a long time so that they, recognizing their time and their availability. When you're talking about doing an outreach process like this, leaving it open, we could see through the results, those first 2-3 days were when we got all the responses with the exception of one person who waited till the last day. And so those who really want to participate choose to engage. Leaving it open for a longer time doesn't actually necessarily mean that you're going to get more responses. But it does beg that question in terms of how do you want to handle this information? Do you take it like our standard kind of outreach process that, when we say 75% are in support is it 75% of those who participate or 75% of the total households who could be affected? So that's one of the key questions that we're looking into. Here's just a few other questions we're really looking into based on reviewing the feedback that you all have given us, reviewing some of the questions that come out from other places. One of the things that I would highlight here, this is one of the few areas we have qualification in our language that you qualify for traffic calming. In other places, like with the integrated 5-year work plan, we just prioritize requests, right? And if they're not high priorities, they don't get built. It does create an interesting conversation when you're talking to the public and we say, yeah, you have a speeding problem, but you're not a high priority for us. That can get into an interesting conversation. So we just have to figure out what's the right way to communicate that if we choose to not go from a qualifying perspective. If you say you don't qualify, that's a little bit more understandable. So these are just some of the questions. I won't go through all of these, but there are a few things that we're just really looking into to say, are we talking about a speed policy or are we talking about a traffic calming policy? One of the questions that keeps coming to my mind is it a volume and speed policy or is it just a speed policy? If we're just trying to address speeds, why are we talking about volumes as a qualifying criteria? That said, in most of the cases now under our current policy, people don't qualify based on speed, they qualify based on volume. And so if we don't include the volume, are we cutting people out who would otherwise be able to ask for and request this? So lots of questions to be answered. Just wanted to give you a brief update today in terms of, and then give you that information on the process and take any feedback you have.
Thank you so much, Ryan. My biggest question, I want to just get confirmation that timeline works for everyone. And of course, any other observations are welcome. Commissioner Hansen?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, fantastic. This is really good. I appreciate the extra time. What I would ask is that maybe this would be a good time for each commissioner to say, okay, these are some problematic streets I know about because people talk to me. And how would we make that work so that then to work with you or someone on the staff. So how would this work? Something that struck me, and I heard this on one, I think it was a survey we gave, and we again used the speed bump example, and so people get that in their mind. Oh, speed bump versus non-speed bump, and it's like, no, we have lots of tools. So here's all the different tools. Here's pictures of them, and some of them are going to be temporary. And so we show more examples, and that's what you can do. The other is that, and we've run into this, where somebody is very concerned about their street, but they're not involved in their neighborhood association. They don't realize that if the neighborhood association gets involved, they can help you get the rest of those folks to provide their input. So the different tools in which you can actually get a good assessment. And then I agree with you on the prioritization rather than qualify, because people do understand we have limited resources. We're paying for this out of their property taxes. And yeah, there are some other streets. We can do some little things, and the cost of putting a speed cushion is far less than what we did on Kootenai. But they'll understand that. Or we could put some temporary things. We could put temporary chicanes up. So those sorts of things they can understand. You don't qualify for a whole rebuild with curb extensions and chicanes and blah, blah, blah. But maybe what we can do is here. We found these things are helpful. Ultimately, it's about getting drivers to pay attention to the street they're driving on. That's really all. A speed hump, a curb extension, or whatever, get people to pay attention to the street they're driving on. And then they drive the speed limit. Right? I mean, isn't that, so that you help them understand it's less about the actual hardscape, whatever gets put in. And there's such a wide variety of things. And I think the safety team is the best route by which we can flexibly apply those concepts. And then make sure that the policy doesn't hamstring us, tie our hands in our ability to respond to the priorities.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yeah, this is not exactly a Stump Ryan question, but kind of a Stump Ryan question. We recently finally found a contractor to do the traffic calming on Hollyland. Do you know what the progress is on that?
It should be, I thought they were already in, but
We hadn't heard any complaints for a while. That's why I wanted to.
That's probably why.
Okay,
I'll confirm
super.
that for you and get you a status.
Thanks.
Commissioner Gold?
Yeah, I would just ask that you send these slides to the commission when you can.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
All right, thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Oh, yeah, we are. Are we having an executive session on